I have not seen this many humans in one room since pre-pandemic, so it makes me nervous. We look at cameras, but not people. I mean, people, you know what I mean. People are on the other side. Thank you so much for being here. This book is, it's beautiful, it's personal, and it's really important. You've written a book that does the opposite of what I think everyone wants to do, whether from the pandemic or from political PTSD, and that's sort of have our tortoise shell on. You rip yours off, you unpack it, and you share it. How'd you do that?
Oh, it was really hard, and I had a lot of anxiety about putting it out there. I've got a lot of anxiety about talking about it with you guys. But I mean, during the middle of the pandemic, when I was washing my garlic with dish soap, and everybody was scared.
Can I just say that was the biggest moment in the pandemic when we no longer had to wash our groceries.
I know. I said, oh, it's okay. I can just bring it in and put it away. Wonderful. I don't have to taste soapy garlic. Right. But in the middle of the pandemic, when we were all scared and we didn't know what was going on, and everybody was losing their job, and the world seemed so unstable, and you were forced to think about what you were doing with your life and where you were going, and was there something else, was there something better? I felt that deeply, deeply, and I really spun out in my own head. And I started to wonder whether I enjoyed being a journalist and whether I was making anything better, or if we were making things worse. I mean, at the time, it was life and death, and we couldn't agree on life and death issues, and that freaked me out. And while I'm doing all this self-reflection and wondering where I'm going, my mom sent me this hard drive in the mail, and it was a computer hard drive. It contained the size of a microwave. It contained thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of news videotape, alongside my childhood videos, like my entire family story on this hard drive. My parents, I'm sure you all know, I won't rehash it, were helicopter journalists in LA in the 80s and 90s, and as Sue said, they covered OJ and the Reginald Denny beating and every police pursuit you ever saw and every Malibu fire, and they own all the footage, so they kept it all, and my mom sent it to me, and it was what I was running away from when I moved to New York, and then I moved to London. I was trying to get as far away as I could from all of that and my childhood. And I realized that in order to figure out where I was going and what I was doing, I had to go back and look at where I came from and reckon with all that happened.
So I went through the first part, but I bought a Peloton and baked 20 pounds onto my pandemic figure.
I did both those things as well.
You figure out where you came from. Where did you come from?
Oh God, I came from Los Angeles. I came from a news family who tried their best, but didn't always do such a great job. And it made me realize that a lot of what I was spinning out of my head over was an inheritance, kind of a toxic inheritance from my dad. This idea that, everyone's out to get you and no one appreciates you, this rage that was building. And I don't know, Nicolle, I didn't want to be that. And so I had to face it.
And your mom, when you go through this, and which is when we all want to be the best version of ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had a 2-year-old. I was pregnant with my daughter. She was on the way. There was one point where it was Thanksgiving. There were a ton of dishes, and Thanksgivings were always really fraught in my household. My dad would fight with everybody. My dad would pick a fight with everybody, and he would storm out of a Thanksgiving dinner, drive halfway. We'd be in Mammoth. He'd drive halfway back to Los Angeles, and then he'd come back. So holidays were always kind of tense for me, and I find that when a holiday comes around, I want it to be so perfect. I want it to be great. Everyone loved this moment. We're all together. That I put so much pressure on it being perfect, I end up falling apart by the end of the night. And I got so mad at my amazing, wonderful husband, who I love dearly, because there were too many dishes, that I mean, it's crazy. I threw a potato at his head. you're laughing. But it was a big potato. It was a Yukon Gold. And
it was raw?
It was raw. And it was ugly. And I just, like, I felt out of control. And afterwards, I was like, I can't be this person.
Is that when you start writing?
Well, I mean, yes. It was like, okay, I gotta do this, gotta figure it out. I mean, I've already been to therapy when I was younger. I cried for an entire year straight. It was exhausting. And it was helpful. I found that writing Unbelievable about the Trump campaign was really helpful in dealing with the PTSD of the Trump campaign. Yeah. And I was hopeful that this would help me with that. But also, like, it was a story that I knew I was going to write, because the story itself, while it had some darker moments, is really wild. And it's really fun.
So tell the story, because I have worked with you. I mean, we both sort of got our shows around the same time. Our careers have tracked. And I didn't know any of it. So tell the story.
I grew up in a helicopter. I grew up in a
And your mother's an extraordinary journalist. Your father is an extraordinary and iconic and controversial journalist. Tell us their story.
So my parents started a company called Los Angeles News Service, and they started it from absolutely nothing. My dad was 18, my mom was 23. They found a way to get a news camera. More than found a way. They were bounty hunters. They were private investigators. They just shot overnight news in order to get enough money to buy a very fancy, at the time, news camera, which cost a ton of money. It wasn't just like everyone had a camcorder. And they started this company, and then they realized that in order to really cover news in LA, you got to be faster to a story. I mean, smoke showing, by the time you get there in Los Angeles, the fire is out, and that's not great footage. So the way to cover it was, as my dad thought, from the sky. We got to get a helicopter. First, I got a plane. It didn't work. We got to get a helicopter. And my dad went into a couple of helicopter companies, and the first one, he said, I've got this proposal. I'm going to do news from the sky. Here's my business plan. Here's my camera person. It's my mom. And he was laughed out of the room. The second one, the salesman bit and handed my dad the keys to a helicopter that he had no money for and that he didn't know how to fly. And they started this business. My dad learned how to fly from the fire department in Los Angeles. And they took to the skies and suddenly started scooping the competition on absolutely everything. Madonna married Sean Penn in the 80s, 85, I believe. And all of the paparazzi were in the sky covering it. She tipped people off about the wedding. And everyone had their own position. You have to negotiate with the FAA beforehand where you can hover. My dad took the lowest position, which was the riskiest, because everyone assumed the higher up the aerials, you'll get the full vantage point. He took the low position off the cliff in Malibu, right over the water. And lo and behold, she comes out on the balcony at the end with Sean Penn, gets ostensibly angry that my dad is there, and gives the helicopter the bird. So my dad has this footage of Madonna giving him the finger on her wedding day to Sean Penn.
I remember it.
The king of paparazzi comes to my dad's office and says, I've seen a lot of things, but I've never seen Madonna give anybody the finger on her wedding day. I need to have these pictures. I mean, this is a guy who rented a yellow submarine to get pictures of Diana. I mean, this was, he was real. And it was the first example of my dad and my mom finding a way to be clever enough to scoop the competition. They did it over and over and over again, and just gathered from, the dirty stuff of paparazzi land to iconic, history-making, country-changing events. I mean, there's the famous stuff that I mentioned, but they also covered, there's a moment that always sticks in my brain. The California Highway Patrol near the border in San Diego, just viciously beating an immigrant family a bunch of immigrants that they caught in a car. They took them out of the car off the highway, and they just caught them beating them, pummeling them. And it made them an enemy of some in law enforcement. But it was important video. And so I came from that. That's who my parents were. And there's a whole lot more.
I want to get to how that shaped you as a journalist, but I don't want to leave your childhood here, because You write about something that most people can't even talk about, and you write about the darker side of your childhood. Is there anything you want to talk about tonight?
No, sure. I mean, I wrote a whole book about it. So it's complicated. My dad, while bombastic and exciting and magnetic and super cool, fun, was also angry. My dad had a very bad childhood himself. Herself now, my dad transitioned, I'll get to that, but when I'm talking in the past, I'll say him. Her dad, my dad's dad, cut off a part of my dad's ear at one point, was very violent. I mean, he would gamble the family's money away at the racetrack. He would go to the racetrack with my dad, say, hold the money, don't let me have it, it's the rent money. And then when he needed it, he would beat my dad up to get the money. So he had a very bad childhood. And my dad had me when he was 23, and got a job in journalism, was stressed out all the time, never dealt with it. And all of that rage came out on us. My mom got a lot of it. He threw batteries at her, keys at her. There's a video on the server that is so hard to watch because it's the last flight my parents ever took in the helicopter as the business was falling apart. And my dad is trying to narrate intros and outros to the footage they had shot over the years so that they could sell it after they lost the helicopter. And my mom's filming him, and he thinks that she's not balanced. He thinks that her camera's askew. And she just cries out, like, I'm trying my best. I think I'm doing it right. Don't hit me. And it's so terrible and hard to watch because all of that rage, he couldn't control it. And it defined so much of my childhood. And it was the reason why when I was 21, 22, I just picked up and I left. I moved to New York with nothing, no job, nothing. And I just was, I gotta do something. I gotta get out of here.
You said on my show today that some of, the potato story is funny, but you decided to break the cycle. And it's part of telling the story, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've got kids now, and I don't want them to inherit that at all. And that's not to say, it's not to condemn my dad, it's not to humiliate my dad, it's not to find some vindication. It's just to be honest about it and to make sure that it doesn't keep going, because my dad didn't deal with her dad. And if I don't deal with it, then I'm gonna pass it on to Teddy and Eloise, and they don't deserve that at all. My husband, who's incredible, does not deserve that. And I mean, it stops right here.
It's so common and it's so rare to write about it and talk about it. And it's one of the most incredible things as you read the book, because the book isn't totally linear. I mean, you jump into Katy Tur now, iconic newswoman with all of these instincts, not just for broadcasting, but for scooping everybody else. And it is interspersed with all of these, they're not confessions, no one did anything wrong, but this real pain. And the pain of your relationship with your father persists. I mean,
it does.
What's your relationship now?
There isn't really one. We're estranged, and estrangement takes two people. Neither one of us are picking up the phone. And it's hard. It sucks. My dad is missing so much of my life. She's missing her grandkids. And I know that's got to be really painful for her. And I know that this book is probably very painful for her, and there's a big part of me that just feels awful. But, in order to tell the story, I've got to tell the whole story, the good and the bad.
You single your mom out as the only, in the end, in the acknowledgments, you write, I'm not selling any scores except one. My mom is a great journalist, and she missed out on some of the acclaim.
So my mom shot all the video, and that meant that she would hang out of the helicopter physically. Like if this was the edge of the helicopter and there was a door here and then there was free fall, she would be sitting right here. And the only thing that kept her back was a seatbelt, a canvas seatbelt, and I call it a harness. She said it's not quite a harness. And she did that over police pursuits, over fires. And when you're covering a fire, by the way, you're not so far away from it. You can feel the flames on your shins. I grew up feeling them on my shins. And for the Reginald Denny beating in the riots, I mean, the helicopter was being shot at. And they found bullet fragments in the rotor blades. They found bullet damage to the battery beneath my mom's seat. God forbid that battery was not there. After that, the news stations required that she sit on I believe, a bulletproof vest. So she risked her life for this, and she got the shot. I mean, before you had the gyro cam on the front of the helicopter that just got everything very stable. I mean, she would hold the camera, and she got the shot. And they won a ton of awards over their careers, but they won an Emmy for this coverage in particular. And her name isn't on it. And why isn't her name on it? Because the news director and the couple guys on the assignment desk put their names on it. So the men took the woman off. And that sucks. It sucks because not only did she deserve it, she was doing something that almost no women were doing at the time. And she was doing it well. I like that clap.
Yeah. No, I mean, her legacy is also still, and you think of Lindsay Adaria and the women shooting the pictures of the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, your mom, I was thinking in the way you write about her in her early career with your dad, as well as the legacy that you helped set straight, that she's one of the trailblazers when you look
Totally. I went to the museum a few years ago and there was nothing on her, and I just remember thinking, I've got to write the museum to get her in here, and then the museum shut down. But this is my version of my mom in the museum. She did incredible things, and LA News Service would not have been anything without her. I would not be a journalist without her. And just because she's not the loudest person in the room,
it's instructive, right?
Doesn't mean she's not the most important.
We're tired of the loudest people in the room, right? Whole country. I want to ask you to tell one more story that you write about so beautifully, and it's like seared in my brain. You've made this leap. You're at NBC News. You're covering the Boston Marathon bombing for Brian Williams on Nightly, and you're about to eat the first meal that doesn't come in a to-go container, and your dad calls you and says,
I'm becoming a woman.
Yeah, that.
So this is the Boston bombing. It's a huge story. I was pretty young still. It was the first really big story of my career, and it felt like a professional coup. I hadn't talked to my dad in a few days. Our relationship at this point was very strained because I had so much resentment from all of the violence, and our conversations never, read the book, they were strained. And so when my dad calls, I considered not picking it up because I was just tired. But I did, and he said, I'm not a he. I am not Bob Tur. Bob Tur is dead. I'm Zoe Tur. And I remember being very surprised because it didn't compute in my head. My dad, flew helicopters and punched cops and fought with everybody and wore bomber jackets, was so masculine. People likened him to Tom Cruise in Top Gun. And I thought, at first, are you joking? Because he had joked about it in the past. And she said, no, I'm not joking. And then the conversation was about what it meant. Can I call you dad? Yes, you can call me dad. Of course you can call me dad. Well, when are you doing it? What's going on? And, help me understand, because at the time there wasn't really the national vocabulary for it. It was before Orange is the New Black and before Laverne Cox was a household name, before Caitlyn Jenner. And it was right on the cusp of it. It was about to happen, but this was very early. And the conversation, how do I do this? What are we doing? What's going on? Turned from the explanatory to the journalistic side of it to the, okay, fine, if you want Bob Tur to die, that's great, but if we really want to clean the slate and become someone new and move into a new era in our relationship, we've got to reckon with what Bob Tur did, because Bob Tur doesn't just go away with the snap of a finger. Bob Tur is my dad, and Bob Tur did so much, gave me so much, but also took so much. And my dad really did not want to go there, and it caused further strife, and is the it's the origin of why we are in the position we're in now.
Do you have any inkling or hunch as to whether or not he watches you every day at 2, or I guess at 11 his time?
So I'm not sure now. Last year, certainly.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
it's
sorry.
okay. It's okay. Last year, definitely, because we had started a relationship up again, and she was watching a lot, and we were texting, and it was so great. It felt so good. But, you know, as it always ends up doing, it's just something set her off. You know, I said something about grandma coming to see the kids, and it set her off.
Your mom?
Yeah, and she got really upset. And that was, you know, just another, every time we try to build, something takes it away. So it's tough.
And in the, you know, the book ends, and I said this today on the show, I mean, it doesn't get tied in any neat bows. I mean, it ends with you saying, I wish things were better.
So few stories do get tied into a neat bow. And I mean, I wish it did, but it's life. And, you know, life has got all sorts of twists and turns, and you never know what's going to come next.
I mean, what she's missing out on, if she isn't watching you every day at 11 her time, is your incredible hour. And I remember, you know, I think covering things like Uvalde as moms just takes another thing out of you. It isn't, I mean, nothing is ever a story, and you don't cover anything like a story. These are people and their lives. But I remember on the day of Parkland, which happened at 1:37, and so you were on before I was on. And I had particular trepidation about covering a story like that. And you came up and you said, you know, I'm here if you need anything, just call me. And my producer said, she's really good live. I mean, your reputation in front of your face and behind your back is that there's no one better. And I wonder if you, in the moment, can own that and take all the credit and pride of that, or do you really tie that back to your legacy?
I tie it back to my legacy, 100%. My parents were live reporters. I grew up watching it. I understood the rhythms of it. And so while I have made it my own, and I'm in a different version of it in the anchor chair, I think that growing up and seeing it happen in real time definitely influenced who I am today.
So how do you know, we're covering this story, we're covering what a lot of people feel is the demise of our own democracy. How do you bring that to life every day in your way?
Oh gosh, I think it's really hard. And I think that we've got to find a way to talk to more people. And I worry about that because it feels, or it is true, that the audience is getting more fractured. You can go to your preferred corner to hear your preferred version of events. It's problematic. It didn't happen before because there were only 3 places you could go to get the news, and those 3 places pretty much aligned with the facts. Your opinion on the facts could change, or the way you read the facts could change, but the facts didn't change. Today, the facts are all over the place. The facts don't exist in some corners.
Like even the basic facts, up,
The basic
down,
facts.
down, president
Is the sky blue? I'm not so sure.
Right, right,
What did Donald Trump say? Is it blue? No.
right.
And that's scary. And you know, there was a moment in talking about the way we cover things. Remember when we were covering the Barr summary? You very wisely did not work that day. I worked that day. I volunteered. I said, I want to be there for the Barr summary of the Mueller report.
Sunday, yeah.
And I was giant. I was so pregnant. I was about to give birth. And I said, I don't care. I want to be there. I'll work Saturday and Sunday. And we get the summary back from Barr, and because we are so attuned to being live and breaking and now, let's do it as it happens, we get handed this summary, and this summary is misleading. It is wrong. And we have no idea that it's misleading and wrong. We don't know anything. We haven't seen any of the underlying documents. All we have to go on is what Donald Trump's AG says. And so we're reading it on television. I had Jay Sekulow on, and he was gloating. And I didn't have anything to push back on him with because I didn't know what the Mueller report said. And that's a problem. And it's a problem of our own creating. And it's a problem I don't know how we get out of, because if we did not cover it in real time, say we held it back, and we said, we're going to wait till we see the report so we can make sure that this is accurate. After all, this is a political appointee. Fox News Breitbart, whatever, would have come after us to say that this is an example of our bias. It's good for Donald Trump, and so you're a no good, dirty liar. That's why you didn't want to cover it.
Does it matter anymore knowing that they're the actual liars and it's just projection?
That's the question. Does it matter
Do you think it
anymore?
matters?
I want to say no, it doesn't matter, but I do think that there are people in the country who don't pay such close attention and don't know how to parse it. And that's a problem. I mean, there's a big section of the country, a very big section of the country that wants and consumes news and wants to get information, but they don't come to us. They don't come to any TV news. And we have to find a way to get them back. I don't know how to do that. I wish I had a clean answer for it.
Well, they are watching the January 6th hearings. I mean, 20 million people watched last Thursday
Incredible.
night. And the January 6th hearings are unlike anything that's ever been tried before. It's to tell a story using no one in the lamestream media, if you will, none of the Democrats, using not low-level Trump aides, no George Papadopoulos coffee boys, but the inner ring of the inner ring, the people that had Donald Trump's cell phone on speed dial.
I think that's the most incredible thing about these hearings, and I'm glued. I'm literally glued to them because I have to. But even if I wasn't sitting in the anchor chair, I would be watching them at home. I think that they're doing a very compelling job of laying out all the facts, but getting those aides, the campaign manager,
and filming them, the fact that they're all on TV,
filming them and having that testimony on tape and playing it one after the other, that's amazing. I mean, you can imagine that some of these people must have been the unnamed sources for a lot of the reporting out there, but now we're seeing them with their own voice and their own face, saying the truth, which is that the election was fair. And that's what's infuriating about it as well, because you can say, you will tell the truth when you are under oath.
Right.
But when you're not, you're spinning us around and
it's hard
to. That's angering.
It's to look at the witnesses and the tapes in the context of what Chairman Benny Thompson and Vice Chair Liz Cheney and all the committee members want people to see. It's don't trust us, trust Trump's own people.
Yeah, exactly.
But in the context of everything we all know, all of the sins of the last 5 years, it's hard to separate a Bill Barr who did more to quash the rule of law than any AG in modern history from the Select Committee's star witness. How do you split that baby?
You give it context. That's all you can do. I mean, you say Bill Barr, here he is saying all these things, but let's remind everyone that Bill Barr resigned and said glowing things about Donald Trump.
And that he'll vote for him again in 2020.
I find that really hard to reconcile.
Me
this
too.
idea that he was a danger to democracy, was doing a disservice to his voters, that he might have been detached from reality. But yeah, I'd vote for him again. Strange.
It's not strange, it's impossible. They can't both be true. I mean, it's sort of like the brain can't process both. I mean, it's Mitch McConnell's position too.
I got a text from somebody saying that these hearings were a great ad for Ron DeSantis 2024.
I heard that today too, that we'll have the Select Committee to thank if he's the next president. Do you look forward? I mean, how do you cover this moment? Do you try to, at the beginning of the pandemic, Rachel Maddow called me to see how I was doing. I must have been crying on TV and not known it. She said, I was teaching third grade in my dining room and anchoring in my basement, and I probably was crying on TV. But she said, I said, well, how are you getting through? She says, I don't look for the horizon anymore. I just make sure I can see my feet.
Yeah.
There's a thing when the story is so intense that if you just stay on the story and you try not to prognosticate, it's more digestible. But when you have kids, it's hard not to think about the bigger picture of the
Absolutely. And January 6th was a real moment where I got really scared about the future. Because I went home and I started reading All the Places You'll Go to my son Teddy. And it's a wonderful book, and it's got great advice even for an adult. But I started to think, well, I mean, are there going to be all the places you'll go? Is there going to be a country anymore? What's the world going to look like when you're my age? And that scared me on that night. But you have to smile and you have to just, read it as if everything's okay, because what do kids know? I think Rachel's right about trying to see the ground. When you're covering these hearings, you don't want to overpromise about what might happen. I think the Mueller report, we certainly learned a lesson. Don't go forward and predict what's going to happen because you don't know. Just lay it out, and help analyze it. Help people understand what they're seeing, regardless of whether you're going to change someone's mind or whether the committee is going to change someone's mind. I think that's beside the point. These are important for history, and it's important to get it all down and out there so that everybody has a chance to know. And people can care about inflation and also care about the January 6th hearings.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the most sort of insulting thing to say that people know what people are going to care about on Election Day. People on Election Day will care about what they decide to care about.
Just because you talk to one person doesn't mean that that's what the story is. I mean, people are very concerned about inflation. That might indicate the way they vote, but you don't know. It's not November yet, and it might be a combination of inflation and the January 6th hearings, and who knows what, you know?
What do you think? You know, in the book, and you talked about it when you first sat down, that you had this moment of wondering whether what we do is helpful or whether it's making things worse. Did you land on did you answer that question by the end of the book?
I was thinking about our Mueller coverage, and I wondered if it made things worse. I wondered if we had gone back and not covered Mueller until the very end, if we had just taken, stripped away all the analysis and just covered the other day's events, then covered Mueller for indictments and for the final result, if it would have landed harder with the public because they would not have been numb to it, or the expectations would not have been so high. Where I landed was do better.
You think
me do better.
I think it's so amazing that we always sort of on the fact-based side think if we can just figure out how to do it better or sand off the edges so it isn't alienating to anybody else, then Fox News has a massive audience. And I promise I'm guessing no one is trying to figure out how to do that better.
I think they're trying to do a different version of better.
I don't think better is the word. I mean, do it bigger, do it more scandalous. They didn't air the first night of the hearing, but they made an adjustment and they took it Monday. What do you think about that?
I don't know what the decision-making process is there, but it's funny.
It's good for their audience.
It's really good for their audience to see it, and I'm happy they took it. But primetime is a huge driver of opinion among that portion of the electorate, and you wonder when someone's going to wake up and say, this feels doesn't feel right, or there's something. I might be being misled. How do I find more about that? But it's difficult. I mean, I have conversations with people I know and love, and they start saying things that they've heard, maybe not on Fox News, but from the echo chamber on social media or on some blog post or on Facebook, where their friend says something to them. And it's really hard to debunk that, to cut through that, because it's these theories are so twisted and
they're affirmed. I mean, I had a conversation this week about ivermectin, and I'm like, oh my God, people are still taking the horse dewormer. The thing about the bad information is it's put out there, and then it's affirmed, and then Joe Rogan swears by it, and then it's affirmed, and then a friend tweets about it, and then they see it.
And then it doesn't matter that a report came out, a study came out that said that it didn't help at all.
Right.
It's hard.
Because it's a horse dewormer. Not.
That's an example of where, when we're not on the same page about the basics, about science, we do detriment to ourselves. And it partially is because, I don't know, people just don't, I think people are attuned to or just softened to conspiracy, thinking that there's someone out there that's trying to pull the wool over their eyes. And I think that happens with a lot of corporate stuff. I mean, with, selling us healthy food that's not at all healthy. Like this is, this only has 100 calories. This is good for you, but it comes in a package and it's full of saturated fat.
Nothing yummy is good for you.
Yeah, exactly. But that is a corporation using their manipulative powers and their corporate profit to sell you a lie, to make you feel like you're doing something good when you're not. And with that priming to think that, well, people don't really care about my well-being, it opens the door to a lot of other things, like taking ivermectin.
That's such an interesting take on disinformation. I mean, I've always thought of Trump as, do you remember the doc on the guy that ate the Big Mac every day?
Yeah.
What's it called? Just Feed Me or?
Supersize Me.
Supersize Me. And I always thought he was like the political version of that. Like Trump I worked in Republican politics. Trump would show up like every 4 years, do his sort of clown car act, like anoint who he wanted, and then go away. When he didn't go away, and that was a dose of Trump that the body politic could take. And then birtherism changed it. He sort of injected hate and racism and lies into the Obama presidency.
Into a fertile landscape.
I don't know that we knew just how fertile it was. But when you go back and look at how responsive the Obama White House was to those totally fabricated conspiracy theories, he was on vacation and he's producing birth certificates, and the responsiveness to the disinformation and the lies is the cycle we're stuck in now. We talk about making more people believe us. Why should that be hard? We lawyers read our scripts and they can only be true.
Yeah, I mean, but they don't trust us because Donald Trump has inoculated himself from criticism by tearing us down and saying that our corporate overlords are telling us what to say when that is not true at all.
I
think we need to explain
brought his
ourselves.
company into the Oval Office. I mean, the Secret Service stated his details for. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, and I guess I just wonder if the two books really stand as this really interesting and singular body of work, sort of the professional and the personal pieces of this moment and being a journalist in this moment. And I wonder if at the end of this second book, you left feeling optimistic that the fevers can break, that we can go back. No.
I wish I could say yes. It's tempered optimism because there is such a large portion of the public that is out there that can be spoken to. And I just think about who votes in our country.
Yeah.
I think last time I checked, we were 122nd in the world. We don't have enough people voting. So there is a big chunk of the population, if you convince them to vote, that could make a real difference. I wish we had compulsory voting. I wish we were like Australia and I believe the UK, where you have to go, I don't know if it's the UK, but Australia at least, where you have to go vote. It's required that you participate in democracy. I think our politics and our government would look a lot different. So if we can find a way to get to those people and convince them to take part, we will be in a better place. That's what makes me optimistic. If we stay where we are with the level of participation that we have, I'm not so optimistic.
People watched you and Tony during the pandemic, two beautiful young anchors anchoring from your basement. The book pulls back the curtain on what that was like. I mean, it wasn't as glamorous as it appeared. I mean, the book does get into some lighter content.
But there's a lot of funny moments, and one of them, and I'm sorry, Tony, because you're in the crowd. One of them is a moment during the pandemic when we were both anchoring from our basement. I had a camera, Tony had a camera, in this space that can barely fit a pool table. It's New York City. I can't believe we have a basement. And there are, cockroaches around. And
mine flooded at one point, and my boyfriend
so did ours, and I thought, oh my God, the camera
Yeah.
equipment.
I thought I was gonna get electrocuted. He brought me like boots. It's like so unglamorous anchoring from home.
It was very gross down there, and made grosser by my husband, who would come down, and he claimed it was the most quiet place in the house, and that he needed to get away, even though I was broadcasting a television show. And he would sleep on the disgusting floor, or he would sit in a plastic chair off to my side and he would work on scripts. And at one point, I am in the middle of an interview. I think it's a retching interview, just a wrenching interview with somebody. It's COVID, it's hard,
Horrible.
It's awful, it's horrible. And my lovely husband, anchor of a network morning show, farts. Loudly. And the plastic chair helps it reverberate throughout the whole room. And I am sure that you can hear it on my microphone. I am positive that the viewer just heard a loud fart in the middle of this very difficult interview. And then it smelled horrible. And I had to hold it together because you can't start laughing.
What? You can't be like, it wasn't me. It was,
and I was like, my face was twitching, and I was just hoping that somebody in the control room was gonna save me and put video over me so that, or just put the interview full so you wouldn't see my face. I very nearly lost it on live television and might have lost my job over it.
I don't think so.
But that was marriage in the pandemic.
And we talked about score settling. I feel like that's the only one in your beautiful love story. So these are questions from the audience. And I'm going to start with this one. Is the internet ruining democracy?
Yes.
I agree. What do we do?
Turn it off? I don't know. Don't you miss not having the internet? I miss not having a cell phone. I'm the last generation that understood what it was like to not be reachable at all times. And God, do I miss it. It's just, it would be a wonderful thing to go out into the world and only find out what people were trying to reach me until I got home and checked my answering machine.
Or to like be out in the world and be paying attention.
Just to
not
be looking at the trees.
Right. Right.
Enjoying the smells and the sights.
What is the scariest and toughest part of your job?
The toughest part of my job is covering any tragedy that involves kids. And that's always been hard, but it's made doubly hard now that I have kids. I feel like I have a new emotional nerve endings. Uvalde was grotesque and awful. Ukraine was awful. And I find that on those days, I don't know how you do it, but I don't actually pay any attention to the real details until I absolutely have to. And that sometimes will be a few minutes before. I know the broad strokes, but it'll be maybe on the air will I see the full detail of what happened. Because if I hear about it any time before that, I will break down. I mean, I got to a point where they showed the coffins, like the Superman coffin for the kids. I was in my office and I didn't even hear the sound. I looked up and I saw it on television. And I got up and I sat down on my floor and I curled into a ball and I just started crying. In my office in the middle of the day, my EP came in and was like, oh my God, are you okay? And no, I'm not okay. That's definitely the hardest part of the job.
I was on the air when it happened, and it is, they're the worst things, not just to cover, but to know.
Makes me want to unplug.
Yeah. All right. Now, this is a nice note from Drew. Thank you both for keeping me sane these past 6 years, just when you think the news can't get more out of whack, and 24 hours later it does. How do you keep your sanity on the air?
I turn it all off on the weekends. I
don't watch anything either.
I don't do the news on the weekends.
Yeah, and I love Alicia Menendez, our colleague, and sometimes I want to turn her on and watch her, and I will, but it's like a cheat, you know.
Yeah, but you need a break. You need a mental break. So that's how I keep it together. On the air when something completely insane happens, what you're not seeing is me in the commercial break going, oh my God.
Yeah.
I can't believe that just happened.
Yeah, I know, the commercial breaks. If anyone ever saw those. This is from Daniel Y. Katy, you're wonderfully hard-hitting news anchor. Oh, a very nice thing about me. I'm not going to read it out loud, though. That's the host's prerogative. How much influence do you both have over your show's style?
You have a little bit more than I do. I have influence over generally what stories we pick, and it's not to say that anyone's telling me what stories to pick, but there's just news of day that we have to cover. My show is more focused on reporting, so it's reporters, here's what we have. I write everything in my show, or I edit everything in my show. I don't have control over whether we go into a press conference or whether we come out of a press conference. Sometimes I have a little bit of control over that, but mostly that's a decision made by editorial managers above me.
Who's that? Like a desk?
No, like Dan.
I don't work for Dan. I don't know Dan.
There's the dayside managers, and the dayside hours are
dayside ends at 4. It's
very geared toward let's talk about what's happening now. Like when Donald Trump would come out and have a press conference, I wasn't in charge of whether we went to it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You were.
Yeah. I mean, I were, and I still, yeah, it's scary though, because then you're, coming out. What we do is Pat Berkey is my EP who came from Nightly News, and we try to now, if we have to take something, we pull in and out of it, and we have that. So we pulled out of Abbott when he was saying the answer to Uvalde is mental health, and I'm staring at 2 pages of all the cuts he's made. Texas is number 50 of all, like behind Alaska.
And that was incredible.
And but you have to sort of.
I'm in it until the end.
Stay there. And some of that is sort of the time of day. I think there's
it's
a different
time of day. There are a whole list of reasons that go into it. Nothing nefarious. It's just, we'll analyze out of it. If there's something egregious in the middle of it, we will come out. But mostly, it's let's let them get it out, and then we will come on and give all the context that you need. I'm comfortable with what we do. If I'm uncomfortable, then I say something. But I'm comfortable taking news conferences and coming out of them and talking about it.
And so much ends up happening. You end up, especially during Ukraine, you felt like you were on the air when Kirby briefed. And
exactly.
I love this. What is your advice to young journalists looking to get into political journalism?
Buckle up. I think that if you want to do this as a career, you have to make sure that you love it, because if you don't love it, it's not worth it. It will make a lot of demands on your life. It will, you'll end up surrendering your life to it for many years. But if you do love it and you have a passion for it, just ask 1,000 questions, ask 1,000 more, and don't stop until you get some answers.
I would say, kind of turning to this as a career after working in politics, I have more like practical advice. Don't tweet and read everything.
Yeah, that's very
tweet.
Good. Don't tweet.
Don't tweet. Nobody cares what you say on Twitter. You'll never get a job because you said something brilliant on Twitter from anyone.
Twitter is a hellscape.
I think so.
That's what I call it.
That's what I think. I only tweet dog and cat videos now. So I'm going to do sort of dealer's choice here. I've got one more back to the themes of the book and one more news of the day. Which do you want? I'm going to do both, but which do you want first? Where do you want to go back to the book and then?
Let's do news of the day first.
Okay. Is Trump going down?
I don't know. You tell me.
I don't know. I think he'll be I honestly think he'll be reelected if he runs.
I can't imagine he's not going to run.
I don't want it to happen. Believe me.
Do you think that there's a scenario where he doesn't run?
Well, what else is he going to do?
I can't imagine him handing over the mantle to DeSantis.
I mean, I don't come to it. It's the nightmare scenario, and I think that. I mean, have you driven by Mar-a-Lago? Like, it's not like he's like he's at the omelet bar, like spewing his lies about the 2020 election, and I just don't know what else he's going to do with.
I think you're right about that. I don't know. It seems what I can't. And I had a conversation with another reporter about this who was adamant that he wasn't going to run, but I don't agree. I just can't imagine him ceding the authority of the Republican Party and all of that power to Ron DeSantis, which now is what would happen.
I think President Biden can reassemble the coalition that voted for Democrats in 2018 and voted for him in 2020, but they'd have to flex muscles that I don't see the Democrats flexing. They'd have to aggressively push back against disinformation. They'd have to change the conversation to be broader than the economy, and they'd have to make Donald Trump's annihilation of our democracy a front burner issue.
I also think that they need to figure out what's going on with people who are in positions over elections around the country.
Who are winning last night.
Look what happened in
Nevada.
There was a guy a Republican who was running for the candidacy for Secretary of State, and he won. And he says he would not have certified the results of the election. And he has control over certifying the results of the election in Nevada. And that's a scary, scary thing.
The last one is about the book, or about what you wrote about. If you wanted to run away, why did you run toward the same profession?
That's a good question. I wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer. I started off doing pre-med, or the version of pre-med that my school offered, and I failed calculus, got an F. And I was like, that's not good. And then I did chemistry and did not do well in the math portions of chemistry. I didn't have the stomach to keep doing all the math necessary for being a doctor. A lawyer, I was a philosophy major with the intention of using logic and philosophy to propel me to law school. I just didn't want to go to law school in the end. I wanted to go on an adventure, and so I did news. I mean, I guess I think I still loved it, and I think it reminded me of all of the good stuff from my past. And I thought that if I could do it differently, if I could do it through the system as a reporter for a station, as a network journalist, that it wouldn't end up the same way, that I would have a support system in place and I wouldn't need to lose my mind. And so I guess that's why I did it. But that is a really good question. I feel like maybe I should get a therapist to figure out the root of that.
I mean, as your colleague, I'm so glad you did.
Maybe I really didn't want to run away.
No, I mean, I'm so glad you didn't run away. You're the most electric and dynamic anchor at the network. We're so lucky to have you.
Thank you very much.
And it's such a beautiful book. It's all these things, and we dwelled on, I think, what you spend the most time on, but it's also a love story, you and Tony, a glory of motherhood without being shined up the way some stories are, and it's beautiful. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And there are signed copies of the book for sale in the lobby. Go buy one. Are you signing them, or they're signed already?
They're signed already, but if someone wants me to sign it, I will sign your book if you already have it.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, guys.